Where did I put our? Well, hello everybody. Welcome to the show. It is time for another Sunday afternoon discussion with today we have Rob Ryder Hill. We just made it through some amazing technical difficulties that may or may not have been all in my head due to some. Anyway, so it turns out that I am very capable about creating a lot of drama last minute, right before we go on, over silly things. But marijuana may or may not have been involved. On my side, anyway. So hopefully, Rob.
Too much or not enough, right? It's a tricky balance to strike.
Yeah, no, I think I got high and didn't realize that we were actually recording when I thought I should have just recorded it to see if it was working, and it was working at the time. So anyway, thanks for coming on the show. Appreciate you doing this. We were talking about this. Well, the background, of course, was we were talking last week, right? And just like chatting, and I was like, hey, can we do this in front of other people, because I really enjoy so like the whole thing I'm doing with the Rufus Opus thing lately has been this Zeus cult thing. I'm trying to get the idea that everything is one thing out there again. The whole stuff that we used to everybody knew about because we were all illuminated. We were all back in the 90s. We were all part of the Illuminati, and we all knew everything about how it all worked and what the forces were that we were representing, and that everything was one thing, and that the flying spaghetti monster was actually as valid or even more valid of a representation of how everything is one thing, and there's been this explosion of personal relationships with individuated instances of deity, in my opinion, and in my interpretation of things, and it's great, but I think people forget that everything's one thing. So I've been trying to bring that forward, and that's one of the key Rosicrucian elements to the entire what we think of as the Western mystery tradition, right? And in a lot of ways, but the thing about the eye in the pyramid, and my little logo in the corner there with the little light coming out of the eye is we're all bearing the light of gnosis, right? The light of illumination into this world, because we're all manifestations of Zeus. Magicians who've been doing this kind of thing, who've gone through the initiations and the process and transformations of the great work, our lives are not always easy. They're not always smooth sailing, and it's not always prim and proper roses and joyful excursions with lots of cash money to cover all of our expenses on demand as needed. We're cutting edge, and we're experimenting, and we're testing, and at the same time we're going through the internal alchemy, the transformation of the self, and the pursuit of our idea of enlightenment and wisdom, and the experience of that inner light ourselves, that we're trying to broadcast into the world at the same time, and it's not like, I mean, to a degree, there's a calling that comes on people who live their lives in public and write books and are able to, your chat book that you published recently, I can't remember what the title is, of course, off the top of my head, but
You mean this one?
That
Black
one,
chat book.
the black chat book, of course, the black chat book. Actually, my copy's over. Anyway, but the black chat book that you just published, I mean, it's one of the most convenient, handy guides to understanding the essential pieces of ceremonial magic and the things that you really wish that people would have gotten out of Donald Michael Craig and Donald Tyson, and the people that were able to capture that, right? The pieces that work, you've got distilled.
Yeah. I mean, in fairness, I got this stuff from them. Do you know what I mean? Donald Tyson, particularly his tarot book. So he had this book about using tarot as a as a temple tool, as a portable temple tool. So you would replace all of your elemental tools with it. You'd replace altars with it, and he had these ways of setting it up.
Right.
That when I was kind of messing around with Golden Dawn stuff prior to initiation, so about 10, 12, 13 years ago, I was traveling around quite a lot. And so I revisited this Tyson book that I'd had in the 90s. And what it does is it forces you to essentialize, right? It forces you to go like, what is functional and what is not functional? I think that, and Donald Michael Craig as well, like, was the first workable examples of that kind of Golden Dawn tradition that I came across. Do you know what I mean? As somebody who, for many, many years, I wasn't connected to the community. I didn't really know there was one, to be fair. I just kind of thought like I was finding the last remaining magic. I had no idea.
It was back when you were still innocent and having a good time with life.
Yeah. Oh man, yeah. Halcyon days, right? But when it comes down to that, like, you have to make it work. And I started off very early doing very complicated Crowley stuff that I didn't understand, in that cliche, oh, I haven't made the tools, but I've taken quite a lot of drugs way.
Right, but that's
oh well, yeah, and I think that's like a sort of a birthing story for so many magicians, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Because what it shows you that things work. It shows you that it's really risky, and it shows you that, like, it is worth kind of going back and figuring out what's actually happening here.
Right.
What I've done in the chapbook, I think, is to try and build on precisely that kind of work that people like Donald Tyson and the sainted Donald Michael Craig were doing. Because I have this contention, right, that this tradition of ceremonial magic, as we've inherited it, which both of us are, I think, at least come through that GDAA sort of vibe.
Right.
A very particular structure, very particular sort of
drugs.
Yeah. But even without that, Mathers obviously being an incredible square. What I think is that it's a remarkable system, and particularly the Golden Dawn system. That's what hooked me in, was wanting to understand this remarkable system. And I'm not going to claim that I do. I am in a GD order. I haven't progressed very far with it because I'm always running off doing my own stuff.
And they're kind of
slow. But I have a huge esteem for this tradition. But I think it was built by people who hadn't yet made it work, inevitably. And I think Mathers was a genius with a really, really advanced mind. And what he's done is, in order to try and like extrapolate from the ciphers and to create this ritual format over several years, is thrown in everything that he knows. And it's like what I would consider like a kitchen sink system. It's like there's stuff in there that he was putting in there unnecessarily to try and kickstart it into working. Mm-hmm. And then what's happened is, for what we are now, like 140 years near enough, 135 years, give or take, we've been repeating that. And there was a wave of innovation with Crowley in terms of his tinkering and his appropriation and his remodeling of it into the AA system. And then there's been waves of independent work. I'm really proud of the sort of independent UK magical traditions in the 60s, 70s, 80s here, because I think that was an exciting time, because people weren't really comparing notes. They were figuring it out in isolation. And it was, I think, very exciting because of that. But there's been a lot of people effectively repeating the work of Mathers, like, okay, so we need to make it work again. And in any other discipline, we've refined, we've evolved. Like an automobile looks very different now to 100 years ago. And yet the machine that we're using to try and kind of like, in that language, ascend is the same machine. So we should have evolved it. We should have refined it. We should have figured out what's working, what's not working. We should have been able to make it more efficient. And then...
Well, there was a revival, right? There was the revival of the Goetic tradition, kind of derailed a lot of the progress that was being made. Like the Golden Dawn tradition, like with Crowley and whatnot. In the 70s and 80s and 90s, even in the United States, it went through the ringer, right? With on the Thelema side, you know, with what's his name, Moda, and all of that infighting with the OTO crap. And the Golden Dawn isn't much. At least in the American and Canadian lineages, they've got it's a painful history to watch, you know, and
we can, and as big as the scene is now, we can literally point at the survival of these traditions being down to like a small group of individuals.
Yeah,
do you know what I mean?
Around 125 members each. Like that's like I've known enough GD and AA group heads and members and whatnot. We've compared notes. Everybody has about 125 members. Like that's like on a good day. You know, like not necessarily active, but on the rosters, right? And of that, there's maybe a couple dozen that work in the system at different degrees and different stages, and that's great. It's a machine that's creating a form of illumination, right, in the world. It's shining the light of gnosis, right, into this experienced existence. It's great. But
two things. Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, but like that resurgence of interest in historical texts that came out of Jake Stratton Kent, specifically his work was the major impact on the scene, but also Joseph Peterson and the Betts translation of the Greek magical papyri became very popular around the time that Den did the translation, like 2010-ish, right? So up until then, the Golden Dawn had started to tarnish its image a bit and had lost a lot of its interest, and then this new shiny new occultism from the past came back, right? And everybody was like, okay,
right.
But meanwhile, like, it didn't negate the truths of the Golden Dawn systems and the Golden Dawn branched systems, and it's like an entire generation of magicians kind of lost sight of that framework that is assumed with Gen X magicians. Gen X magicians were trained with that shit. We look at everything through this idea of QBL, Kabbalah, whatever. You know, whether we mean to or not, we just have that imprint from Weiser, from Red Weiser's books. It's just
sure. And core technologies that go with it, like astral travel, fast working stuff.
At the 11 Lessons of High Magic, right, by Donald Michael Craig. Right. Every one of us had that, some form of it, one edition or another, with the big blue triangle on the front that wasn't even a pentagram. You know, like you can't
we had a copy of it in Treadwell. We had a copy of it in Treadwell's about 2 weeks ago, and I can't tell you how many times I was like hugging it. Do you know what I mean? It's like that's a homework.
Right.
For our generation, right?
I carried it around high school. Like in 10th grade, I was one of my books I carried from class to class so everybody could see that I was a weirdo. I was like, I advertised that shit, and I used Donald Michael Craig for it. So, I mean...
But what's interesting to me, like, because obviously I've been very involved in that, like, the grimoire resurgence. And that kind of spirit magic. And it's the direct contact with living spirits, right? With perceptible gods and spirits with whom you can interact, with whom you can have a dialogue at least as reliable as us trying to set this up about 20 minutes ago. You know, it's that has
it worked.
Yeah, we got there. It's that has reshaped my approach to the Golden Dawn, these initiatory formula, right? These initiatory machines, right? What are they for?
Right.
And I think that there's almost like a safety mechanism in the Golden Dawn proper, where we're almost not quite ever directly dealing with the spirits. You know, you have the kind of the god forms, and you have these images, and you have these structures, and you know, you're not doing things like possession, for example. You're not doing things, even particularly mediumistic experience with these things. If you are, you're probably going into the tree to do that, right?
Yeah, it's taking place in a safe lab environment. It's very much a lab. It's astral lab work, you know, for the great work. It's
right. But once you've done like 3 GV operations, do you know what I mean? Like the sense of the necessity of that safety falls away, because the efficacy of like unsafe magic is just more effective. It's just better.
Right.
Right.
But you've built up the safety mechanisms too. You know, I mean,
Right.
you don't have to do
Right.
LBRPs all the time when you know Michael and Gabriel, and you know when you've developed your
For real.
relationships with the, when you've built the tools, and you know what Edgen means, you know what Oriens means, you know, because you've built their tools and you've conjured the sylphs and the salamanders, and you know them, and it's not Gob, the king of the gnomes. You know, it's not. You know, it's not Titania. I mean, it can be some days, but it's not. You know what I mean? It's not like that. It's just elemental tools for elemental magicians for doing your magic with, right? And I
Well,
don't know.
I think there's a lot that can be quite quickly taken out of the sort of GDAA system as soon as there are like living functional gods present. So I'm a big fan of patronage,
Oh
right?
yeah, yeah.
In my book, it's Hermes and Hecate because I mean, exemplary gods of magic, right?
Well, yeah, and they're
Once
the
they're
principal.
there, you have a relationship with them. That takes a lot. You know, there's no necessity for like a rose cross ritual at that point. Do you know what I mean? It's like they're there, they're
Right.
there, they're on it. They're actually going to help you and guide you through this process in a way that rarely would your initiator take that much interest in your private work. Do you know what I mean? So
Right.
there's a
But
degree of support there, and we need some hand holding going into this stuff, right? And I just think that it's much more effective to have that hand holding like from a god
oh yeah,
than somebody who's going to actually have a limited amount of
you
time
can't
and energy to your practice, right?
you can't trust people anyway, right? So like the problem with initiatory systems is the people that are going to do the initiations are people, and people suck,
Right.
as we know. We know enough people, you know, that whole it's a mess.
So in our sort of late Gen Xy, there was this idea, right, that like oh, I've lost my thread. What was I going to talk about initiation? Fuck, I've lost it. Where were we, Josh? What were we just
Are you
saying?
kidding me?
I had it
I've been
there and it
relying
went.
on you this whole time. I was like, he is with it. He's on top of his shit tonight. This is great, man.
That's tonight. That's it. That's me on top of my shit. We're done.
No, I was relying on
No,
that.
what I was going to say is there's an idea that whatever happens in the initiation hall
Uh-huh.
can sort of presage an initiation, but the real initiation is something that might be an effect of that, might happen in the initiation hall, might happen somewhere else. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And we're doing this ritual theatre, and of course, if your hierophant is mine is incredible, and there's no denying what happens in his temple. Do you know what I mean? But we don't, without, in our own practice, without that, and I'm predominantly independent, even in my sort of initiatory stuff, like we don't have that support. So for me, it was much more interesting to see the initiatory experiences that I'd been having, which were coming from my grimoire work,
Mm-hmm.
hugely from my Abramelin that took me 2 attempts and pulled my whole life to pieces. But those, it's when we start seeing functional model from these very unsafe
Right.
traditions
That's what we were talking about. That's
then
right.
we can have a sense of how we make the engine work. Do you know what I mean? It's
Right,
like
right.
if you've never seen what the fuel burning looks like, then how do you know when the magic's working?
Right.
Something because my job is tarot and it's at Treadwell, so a lot of the people that come in will be magicians, and there's often a little bit of kind of like mentorship that happens there, and a lot of it is like the worst thing that can happen to a lot of magicians is the first time it works, because up until then it's safe, right?
Right.
And we're meditating, and it's like a large, very elaborate mandala, and we can be having these kind of very profound experiences. And then the bomb goes off, right?
Right.
And I think that's a sort of like that's a separating moment. That's when some of us will not come back, and some of us will be like, oh, everything has changed. You know what I mean?
I
think we can get so much quicker now, really, where we are right now in the culture than at any point since the revival. Do you know what I mean? Like we now have tools that are like crazy efficient. Do you know what I mean? I think anyone that will have done like any of Jason Millen's courses in the first month is having stuff blowing up around them. We can get there very.
All right, so getting back to that whole thing there, that whole condensation of tools that was sparked by that grimoire revolution and the whole the revival that we had, right? that resulted in a condensation. Like you said, it condensed the practices, like you're saying, Jason Miller's courses, Jack Grail's stuff, the stuff that Jake provided. So much information that just distilled so much research. Joseph Peterson, all that stuff is distilled. So what you've done with your work takes the same thing with the Golden Dawn stuff, right? And it takes the experience of the revival stuff, and it takes the discipline that was useful and valuable and effective and meaningful from the Golden Dawn tradition stuff, and it wraps it around this experience that we have over in living Goetia that people from our generation have, because we did all that stupid fucking astral bullshit. We did that so many times with these god forms that when it comes time to conjure a demon, it's not that big of a deal, because it's like, we know what's going on. Only it's for real, and then we have real effects, and it's like, holy shit. But we can wrap ourselves around it, but right. We have that, we at least have those two levels of experience to kind of merge it together and not be knocked on our asses. But I don't feel like people who've only grown up in the revival, who have missed out on that Donald Michael Craig, Donald Tyson, people who went right to the Eric Purdue version of Agrippa, and there's not a goddamn explanatory note in the fucking thing. You don't even see which parts are included that were. It's like, it's for scholars. It's for people who wish they had that book when they were doing the research with Donald Tyson's version, and it doesn't fill in enough gaps for these modern kids out here. They're so dumb. They're so strong. They're so powerful. They're so wonderful. They're innovative. They're brilliant. But they're so fucking stupid, and they're doing the dumbest fucking things. And you're just like, why? But it's like, but like,
gosh, we were fucking dumb too, man.
We were worse. They're smarter than us, so their dumbness is worse than our dumbness. And they have working magic. It's poor fools. But
yeah.
But no. The point is that your system. What's great about your system and the little chapbook that you're producing, it's brief. It's to the point. It's got that condensated focus on things, and it marries the parts of the Golden Dawn stuff that was actually useful and meaningful for what we found when we went into the revival, with actual experiences, and like you said, that the patronage. None of the things that
it's in the spirit magic. It functions. It's very stripped down, but it functions as well as a planetary grimoire as it does as a map, as a sort of model of initiation. What I wanted really was, with the awareness that, like, if you're going to seriously engage with one of these traditions, or if you're going to seriously engage with one of the texts that I love, that's a long process. If you're going to do the GV, which I still think is the most stripped down of the traditional grimoires, it's unlikely you're going to get those tools made in 6 months. And where I'm talking to people, it's taking people a lot longer than that, because life and all of this. And it's appropriate that that's the case. But we don't need to wait 2 years to do magic. Do you know what I mean? So we can start with something that functions now. Then there are training wheels on this system. It is a little bit safer than kind of doing a GV operation. And it's, Jake's Night School, for example, is an incredibly stripped down, incredibly like functional system. It's still going to take you months to just get the tools, to just get a sense of get your head around it. Do you know what I mean? To have done the dry runs, to get to the point where you're actually having those first significant. This, it's set to take 3 months. I think very few people who would be watching your channel would need to go through this. All right. 1 month at a time. We can all do breathing exercises. Do you know what I mean? We can all focus on stuff. Nobody needs to reinvent these wheels. Do you know what I mean? It's just saying, I think one of the big things for me is listen, if you don't know what it does, either find out what it does or take it out, and let's just stick to stuff that we know what it does. Do you know what I mean? Everything here has to have a function. And one thing that is my opinion about my engagement with the grimoires is that there are a lot of grimoires where I don't think the guys compiling these texts really knew even what some of the tools are for. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
They know they're supposed to be there. And so you get some, the classics and the texts that were available. Like, even when we were starting out, Josh, it was still like lesser key, greater key. Do you know what I mean? Like, how many grimoires really
if someone
did you
hadn't
get hold
checked
of?
it out,
Right?
because I wasn't at the library that week.
These are extremely impractical texts if you're like, a sort of stoner punk in South London in 1998. It's not something that you can kind of like get across at all. Absolutely, there is great worth in following those systems through, and the relationships that get built while we're doing our tool making. And this isn't to say that, if you were to do the Black Chapbook, there's no point. Yeah, I think you could rely on it as a system, but like the whole point is inquiry, right? We should go past it.
Mm-hmm.
But we don't need to wait for the kind of simple magic that's in here, and it really is. Everything's in English. You know what I mean? I'm using the vowels for the elements. For the kind of simple magic that's in there, like you don't need much. You don't need to spend a lot of money. I've made most of my tools now for less than £20.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And could have spent less.
Right.
If I hadn't, I'll buy the stuff. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely. That's one of the things that, like, I'm low key really proud of the fact that 7 spheres is something that everybody can do with a piece of paper and a pencil. You don't need more than that.
7 spheres already, Josh, because as you know, I've ripped that book off 5 or 6 times.
I support every one of those rip-offs. I think that your applications continue to bring out aspects of it that I never would have seen or thought. But anyway, it's great. But,
we've sat and talked about. Every one of us would rewrite our work differently.
Absolutely. I would actually finish writing mine. I never.
But like, that's a great example of, first of all, starting with a stripped down system, but then also let's just make it as practical as possible.
Well, I'm not here to.
The other great simplifier of magic that we haven't talked about, of course, is Milo Duquette. And for so many of us Gen X-ish guys, he's the one that told us you can do it with cardboard.
Oh, absolutely. I mean? And the My Life with the Spirits, right? That came out at the right time. Also, because if it weren't for My Life with the Spirits, we wouldn't have thought, like, it was the mainstream magician world supporting Jake in a way that was like his down to earth experiences and Jake's down to earth experiences were honestly the same. And it was like, oh, okay. So when you strip away the bullshit, this is actually what people are experiencing according to Lon Milo Duquette. And Jake's stuff is more interesting and fun. Let's do Lines of Goetia.
This recognition is really important. Like, not to put too fine a point on it, you and I work in very different cosmoses, right? Cosmoses. We work. We're both within one thing, but I'm in a very pagan 3-world model. There isn't a transcendental Godhead.
You're not.
Not using the sort of traditional Kabbalistic structure. So my machine looks very different to your machine. The sets of spirits I'm interacting with are very different to your sets of spirits. And yet when we do talk about our experiences, like the recognition, and this is why we're friends, Josh, is because when we talk about our experiences, like we're experiencing the same thing. And the fact that we can be having experiences of the same thing through radically different windows, that's the most exciting thing for me.
Yeah.
And so it's important to get people having the experience as quickly as possible, because until you've had it, you don't know what you're talking
about. Right. And you don't know how to have a decent conversation on it. And we can't have a decent conversation with you, which is why we teach these things. It's not because we give a shit about your place and your relationship with God. It's because we want to have a good time while we're here.
I've frozen. Good Lord. Are we still on?
I'm seeing you fine. You might not be seeing me fine, but you're coming through okay.
I think it's a Josh thing.
No, I think it's a you thing.
Everyone can probably hear me.
I can hear you, yes. Okay. Hang on just a second. Let me see if I can't reset something here. Dun, 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 dun. How do I pause that? Let me turn. There we go. Okay. So that failed. All right. So I've lost my Zoom connection, it seems. Hermes Interruptus. Yeah. You know what? Make sure he. Hey, there he is. Hey, I was just making sure. All right. All right. All right. Hang on. I can hear you, and the rest of the audience can hear you too. Just so you know. All right. Great, great. And let me turn you back on. Where is it? He's back, by the way, everybody. I don't know if you're actually seeing him or not, but you're about to. Haha. Okay, cool.
All right.
All right. Hello. Hello, everybody.
Where were we?
So we were fine. Crap. As soon as you lit that candle, lol. That's what he says. Okay, so before we go on, let's take a moment here because I wanted to catch up on our chat notes because people have been chiming in while we've been here. So people support the flying spaghetti monster. Qui-Gon is with us. Luke's Luthor is here, and Agatha and Null Void. Null Void says the Black Chat book is legit, highly recommended. Qui-Gon says once he's gotten over initiations in schools and lodges and lineages and just got started doing magic, things got a lot easier. Let's see, Agatha says hello, and Qui-Gon says Hermes Interruptus, and we're fine on YouTube, and as soon as we lit the camera, we're back to normal. So everything's fine. Everything's just fine. So
I've got a thing I want to say about initiation, actually, and about the sort of the idea of the ordeal of initiation.
Mm-hmm.
As somebody who has experienced a good degree of ordeal of initiation, and particularly around my two attempts, one failed and one successful, at Abramelin, and having gone through a model that I'm trying to express for people at the moment, I'll get to probably in 5 years or so, but one that seemed to function much more efficiently, like once we take a lot of this excess baggage around. Like, I think there is an idea that, like, you know, and I've said this, like that effective magic, whether it's effective or whether it's initiatory, like whether it's practical or initiatory, kind of should pull your life apart. And it should, right? Absolutely, it should. Yeah. We should be in a creative, ecstatic moment. But I think that the ordeal is unnecessary. And having been through it, I'm absolutely convinced that we can teach people how to go through these radically transformative processes without the fucking suffering. And I will tell you how.
I think it builds character, though.
Oh, it builds character. What you're describing there is trauma, Josh.
It's like
that's
character.
What people mean when they say it builds character.
It's the same thing.
It's attachment to trauma. Yes, exactly. So can we skip that?
I'm
fully. Initiation isn't there to build character. Initiation is absolutely the opposite of that. It's there to sort of to get us past that bullshit. And I really think it's the clinging on to the narrative character bits. You know, we can't come out of the initiation hall expecting to be what we were when we went in, and so we mustn't be clinging on to what we were when we went in. Do you know what I mean? The function of these things is the cocoon, right? We use these stable methods to the extent that we can make them stable to provide a vessel that will allow us to capitulate entirely to the transformations that are necessary.
Right.
When a caterpillar is on the way to a butterfly, the middle bit is goo, right? So you need to rely on a stable structure, your initiatory machine, right? Mm-hmm. A formula that functions, a ritual that's stable and as safe as it can be. And then within that, within the line, around the zero, you need to capitulate to the empty space, the raw potential of what's in the middle of that, right? And if we are expecting that, you know, I'm gonna be the same dude after a significant, and I'm gonna have the same relationships, and I'm gonna do the same work, and I'm gonna find the same things funny, and I'm gonna be attracted to the same kind of people. This is all productions that are way beyond the level of consciousness that we're dealing with and trying to get closer to, right? Mm-hmm. If we're trying to find that divine spark, if we're trying to find that, we need it to be unmediated, right? And that means it needs to not go through layers and layers and layers and layers and layers of this projected ego. It's a non-attachment thing.
But that's the thing is the attachment is where the pain comes from, and the ordeal is not. The ordeal lasts as long as your attachment is attached, and it's not.
Yeah.
It's not something that any like you can't take Steve the Wonder Magician, who just figured out that Goetia magic works and is using it on their love life, their work life, and every other aspect of their life to great success. You can't tell them that, you know, they're working, what they're manifesting is all destructive stuff, that not because of the types of magic, but because their desires are so poorly developed that they're still going after things that are dangerous to them because they haven't dealt with their traumas or whatever. You know, they're using this powerful magic to powerfully manifest their powerfully fucked up minds, right? And you can't tell
We want
anybody
everything
that.
to change, and the resistance of being part of the change. We want to change things out here. It's exactly the same in life. We want to fix everything out here,
Right.
and for this to be like consistent, and it's
Right.
that it's non-functional, right? And we can tell them. We can tell them your little story of who you are is fucking bullshit,
Right.
and it won't serve you in magic. And if you are having ordeal in initiation, that's not success. That's failure. Let go. Relax. Trust your spirits.
Would
and
you have
find
listened?
out what you without that? You know.
But did you listen? Did you ever listen?
Did I ever listen?
Yeah, I mean, like, we heard this when we were growing up.
I don't know that I did hear this growing up, actually. I don't know that I did.
You did?
I heard this from Buddhists. I heard this from magicians.
I heard it all
Do you
the
know what I
time,
mean?
that they were like, you know,
Did you
get your
really?
shit together. Oh yeah, well, I was a fuck up. I mean, I assumed you were a bigger fuck up than I might be. I might have given you too
Almost
much credit. You might not be as big of a fuck up as I was, but I never listened. I was stubborn. I was experimental. I was judgmental. I was untrusting because people lied. They really wanted my money, and they super wanted my time, and they wanted my energy to be transforming their game. Right? They wanted their game to be the game everybody played, and I'm like, I want to learn how to take my will, and that's what we're supposed to be talking about, by the way, is the sovereignty of the will. We are talking about that. We just haven't explained how just yet. But like, I want to take my will and manifest my desires in the world, but everybody wanted me to be like a Wiccan or a fucking druid or a white light healer, and it was all interesting, but it's not.
It's not radical. It's not new.
No, and like the OTO was great, whatever, but it's not
ongoing. Yes, there was a lot of talk about like we should be getting therapy while we're going through magic and stuff like that. And I think that's
but yeah, right, so. But like, I'm sorry, I've kind of lost my point there. But the thing, like, getting back to that, the therapy part of all that stuff, and what you get out of that circle with the zero inside, and the chrysalis where you've got the hard edge with the transformative stuff on the inside, the ordeal part of that is necessary and essential, I think, and that attachment that you have to get rid of, right? How can you tell someone what in a way that they're going to hear it?
We've got to teach better ecstasy. We've got to teach better ecstatic practice.
Okay, right. So back to gnosis, right? They have to actually
gnosis. We've got to teach people how to yield.
Yes.
We've got to teach people how to melt, right? How to trust their spirits, how to trust their circle, how to trust their machine, and how to absolutely collapse within that.
Right.
To become something new.
Because and in that moment,
and without it, and this is what Crowley got, right? That the Golden Dawn did not, is the necessity of the ecstatic practice. Mm-hmm. That it shouldn't, and still he's approaching it in this very rigid, very controlled way. Do you know what I mean? And it's something we have in the West much better exposure to meditative and ecstatic kind of stuff than ever. Do you know what I mean? But we need to be teaching people how to have, because an ordeal is just an ecstasy that we're resisting, man. It really is.
Okay, I can see that, because a catharsis moment can be seen as an ecstatic moment.
Yeah, because ecstasy it's not nice.
Mm-mm.
Do you know what I mean?
I understand. Yeah. I like the nice ones.
You know,
My Zeus stuff is all about, it's about the electric. It's about spiritual cocaine. I mean, honestly, that's what I'm interested in. I can't do the real stuff because I'm highly addictive, and I just might as well just set my money on fire directly, and I don't want to do that. So yeah, but no, I don't know. Getting back to the true will part of this, because I do want to make that bridge eventually to the sovereignty of the true will and that whole transformation of the self. The thing about letting go and going through these ordeals that initiation is supposed to provide for you, that also working with the spirits creates, because it broadcasts your negative aspects loud enough that you have to deal with them. Whether you want to go through an initiation, or if you want to just jump into grimoire magic and manifest shit that makes you face your inner problems, either way you go through a transformation of the self, right? And in that transformation you learn who you are and what you want, right? And what you really want to do with your life, right? And how, do you know what I mean? What do you made a face?
if it works, like everybody
Well,
doesn't have experience. You know what I mean?
I
Like,
think no, you're right. But people,
you know,
I mean,
I'd love it to be that reliable, and I think that's what I'm trying to figure out. Is like, how can we make this something that is more reliable? Because I think it can be, but I think that a lot of the issue with ordeal is that it causes these crises that people don't recover from. Do you know what I mean? Why does
yeah.
Abramelin drive me mad? Because
Well,
they
there's
actually don't.
because
It's
there's
a very traumatic ritual.
because they can stop. They can choose to stop. They can take an off ramp mid process and stay in that half formed state and never finish the coagula. They can solve way and leave. And leave
Yeah,
this I'm
yeah,
dissolved. Great, but get it together, man. I don't, that there's an off ramp, and people quit. Do you
yeah,
care?
yeah. Well,
Is
that's what
that is
I
that
mean.
is that
That's what,
on you? That's not on you. That's fucking fuck them. No, I'm serious. No, and speaking
so
of
let's talk.
no, because all
Sorry,
right, as
go on.
as manifestations of the all thing, in my opinion, right? It doesn't have to be transcendental, whatever. It can be, in my opinion, it's emergent. It's everywhere at the same time, and it's all of us. It's not separate in any way, shape, or form. It is us. That emergent principle of deity is equally coexistent in all things, including these fuck ups who are fucking up and taking an off ramp a halfway finished with Melon. It's none of my
Yeah,
business. You know what I mean? And I can
yeah,
have an egotistical response to them that is comparing my experience to theirs, and I can have an opinion that's based on my privilege or my lack of privilege that is going to express it socially with some kind of bullshit on an internet exchange, or I can just be like, that's another aspect of deity that's having a bad time, poor guy, and move on with my life. Because what I keep finding out is that pursuit of God, that ecstatic moment that is transformative, is actually the essential way that we find contentment, pleasure, and what's the word? It's like
love,
satisfaction,
love.
love. Yeah, love, right? Where you're
It's,
actually loved and loving, because you're not
yeah,
you're not blaming, and you're not expecting, you're not disappointed in anybody. You're just like, you're celebrating God being God in God's own way. And goddamn God for being that way, but God bless God anyway. Whatever. It's like you don't have to have an opinion on everything. You don't.
right. So this speaks to my sort of concept of sovereignty, right? So I inevitably sovereignty comes up a lot in my tarot readings, right? Because it's a big symbol in the traditional. I use the Marseille tarot, so sovereignty, royalty is a huge sort of symbol in that. And I've done inevitably a lot of thinking about that. I'm not a natural royalist, you know what I mean? I sort of bulk at these ideas. So I try and think about, what does sovereignty mean before we even start thinking about true will? Like, what does sovereignty mean in those terms? And so I look at the process, and the first process would be the page, right? What's the page's job? It's to go, well, I need to define this part of my life as being part of my kingdom. So the first thing I got to do is like put a fence around it. This is mine.
Mars.
That is not, right? So like I can focus on what's mine. I can stop people from trampling on it. And then it's putting the crown on. Paige hasn't got the crown on yet. What does that mean? That means that I'm actually like coming back to, the crown is about discipline. The crown is, for me, it's really about transcending ego. I hate that word. It's really about escaping ego. It's really about doing something that is instead of what I want. The crown is about remembering that it's about values first and foremost. Like, what's the function here? And this is what I think leads us towards the capability of hopefully one day discovering true will, is that we get out of our own way. But in order for us to get out of our own way, we have to have the fence, we have to have the moat, we have to have the boundaries that are stopping us from getting into these kind of, ego attached dynamics, right? It's not my business. You know what I mean? What's happening out there? Until we as a sort of human collective choose otherwise, everything is as it should be. Like, and I'm aware of what's happening in the world. I'm aware of what's happening in my country this week. Do you know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
Everything
absolutely.
is as it should be until we choose something else. And the thing that's going to permit us. Oh no, have I frozen again?
That shit.
I'd love to come back.
Yeah, he'll be back in just a minute. You guys are going to be just a moment behind. Just I don't know what the problem is here. Dun 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 dun. So I just have to wait for him to come back. But hopefully we can pick up where we left off. So anyway, for the people that are still sticking around, yes, Kaigon, I also have enough. And Miss LaCroix, nice to see you, Luna. Luke Sluthor is, yes, nice to see that. But yeah, it's very much about all that stuff. I'm enjoying watching the commentary, but I'm also trying to now try some incense. So actually, I think it's my I have to reboot my router. So like 20 minutes after 3, I realized I hadn't done all the technical prep stuff that I needed to do. So I ran over here and got that going. Let me see here. What's going on? Looking at my Zoom at the moment, and I am having a problem with connecting. There we go. There's that. Okay, that's not working. I can't join my meeting. There we go. Hopefully it'll get through now. Well, anyway, I'm having a great time having. There he is. Hey, aha! How about that? Okay, cool.
Oh,
all right. So I was just saying, I'm having a great time having a conversation with you.
Right, yeah, I always love talking to you, Josh.
So let's see here. Oh yes, you're back on. Okay, so we're back streaming again. We're all good. So cool. Yeah, where were we? We're talking about initiations and the commentary has also been about how it's shitty to go through things like this, but the shitty things that we deal with through our ordeals prepare us for other shitty situations later in life. And the recommendation was to light some incense to go with the candle for getting our Zoom stuff fixed. But yeah, it looks like we probably have a good 20 minutes of conversation before it breaks again. So yeah.
Yeah, I don't know how far I got into my role before it cut off, but what I was thinking about was that I think about the crown as a symbol, right?
Right.
And when it's about the crown, it's not about the man anymore. It's not about the human anymore. And that's in our kind of sovereignty symbolism in tantric tradition and in kind of royal tradition in Europe, right? The crown makes us not person anymore. It makes us something greater and a representative of divinity, right? There is
Right.
no royalty without divine ordination.
And as you're
Whatever,
progressing
whatever we,
through the court cards in the Marseille deck, we were talking about that. And so when you go from
yeah.
the page to what where do you get the crown at?
So I read it as going page, queen, king, knight, right? So the page is going, oh, I need to define this part of my life as my kingdom and start taking responsibility. I start off with the boundaries, and then I start figuring out, like, actually, how do I want to operate this part of my life? What mechanisms do I need to put in place, right? Depending on which element I'm dealing with which seat. The queen, then, I think of as being kind of like a maintenance ruler, right? I think of queens as triangles and kings as squares. So with a triangle, I'm thinking about that stability and that strength, but that flexibility. I'm thinking about, what does the kingdom need today? Because I'm trying to understand how to be a sovereign. And if we look at the Empress, particularly in the Marseille, she's holding a shield. So really, she's figuring out how to develop and maintain those boundaries, knowing that the boundaries are in place, the crown is unchallenged. As the king, and this sort of square figure, this 4, what we're doing is we're codifying everything that's been developed by the page and the queen into, like, oh, I know that I need to have 8 hours sleep. I know that I need to eat a certain diet. I know that I can't drink too much coffee. Do you know what I mean? This stuff, then we don't have to think about it on a day-by-day basis anymore. We've just got the rules down. We've laid our table, and we can start thinking about the next generation, right? By generation, the next, like, emanation of our work.
The creation of the expression of our will.
Yeah. And then once we've got that stable, we've got the crown in place, we've practiced it, and we've got that stable foundation in place, the boundaries are in place, that's when the knight can go out and discover true will. That's when the knight can go out and do the great work, can have the adventure, can go on the grail quest, right? Which is really, I think, the kind of the classic, European myth of the great work is that grail quest, that thing that's like, it's going to be hard. And the reason that we can go on that quest as the knight is because we're no longer as vulnerable as we were when we were page, because we've got the crown. And whatever happens, we fall off our horse, we might lose fights, whatever happens, we can come back to the stability of the foundation of the kingdom. If our crown gets knocked off, we come back within those boundaries, we put the crown back on. And the ability to discover true will, and true will for me is always a discovery. It's not something, I don't expect ever to really know what my true will is. I sometimes have a fairly good idea what the next thing to do is. Do you know what I mean? I have that impulse, and I have that sense of recognition, and but it's the road is not mapped out because it's a dialogue, right? I think fate is what happens in the absence of us actually making choices. And to get to true will, we've got to do a lot of work. Huh?
We can argue about that.
Yeah, we did have a lovely argument about that. I think you understood what I was saying. But there's this idea that, like, there's a sort of inertia about how life will run out unless we put these boundaries in place, unless we put the crown on. And then at that point, we can start thinking what might be an entropic inertia, right? Just becoming more and more consumed in the ego story and the suffering. And we can turn it into, we can transmute it in that way within a stable crucible of a well-maintained kingdom.
Yeah. And the well-maintained part, I think, is what... So I had a big revelation after our conversation, just thinking about things. Like, we had a conversation that was an expression of some of the stuff I've been going through, and then I continued to go through some stuff and had some magical experiences and whatnot, and as one does. And one of the things I've understood is that we're like, when I'm happiest in life, it's not because I have achieved a thing, and I've only recently learned that I can't achieve anything and get anything. It's always going to be, there's always going to be, like, I need to be creating something to be pleased, right? And I can't finish a project and be done and be happy. I can't, like, the problem with Christianity is you get saved and it's supposed to be done, and it's not. The problem with getting rich is you think that when you're rich, you don't have problems anymore. Or the problem with getting, whatever you want, anything that you want is the idea that that's going to make you happy, and you're attached to this idea of successfully completing something, and there's no such thing as that. And when I realized that, I had a shift, right? So this whole idea of like the maintenance of the kingdom is precisely like the will of the king is to continue to create and manifest the kingdom, right? And to use the tools that you've developed, the money that you've saved, and all that stuff. And that's where understanding the will is so important, you know, and why that piece of the Western mystery, whatever, hocus pocus, Crowley, mocus, that we get to do is so important, you know, and why. You know, trying to figure that part out, like compare that to whatever idea of fate you have, or whatever idea you have of the role of human beings and everything, and this idea of this emergent property of God that is being manifest through our choices and our decisions. You know, I think all that has to do with the whole sovereignty of the will of the person. You know, that expression of the light and the yeah. Anyway, I forgot where I was going with that. Something about transformation and then.
When we look at the royals in the majors, it's interesting that it begins with the high priestess and kind of ends with the high priest. I kind of disagree with that. I think you know, like I think that the chariot is all of the knights, but the kind of the broad bit where we're establishing our sovereignty begins explicitly in the temple with the high priestess, and with this calling, this vocation, and this dedication to something which is greater than ourselves. That's the first place in the majors that we get the crown from, is from an explicitly values-based spiritual initiation. And then we go through Empress and Emperor through the much more material concerns, Empress being all of the queens, you know, Emperor being all of the kings, through the, like, actually what are the implications of this dedication to divinity externally. Do you know what I mean? Like our spiritual experience can't be estranged, and it can't be in this sort of special place. It has to be manifest in the world. The whole function of the sort of the Gnostic thought around the divine spark is that we are supposed to be letting people see this, letting that light out. Do you know what I mean? It should be casting light onto the world.
Yeah, it's so, for the creation of the world.
Right.
Yeah.
This idea of co-creation that I think is fundamental. You know, when I was coming up, that's what we were trying to be. We were trying to be co-creators with God or the gods, right?
Right.
And I think that, opposed to the sort of utopian happily ever after model, like if I get it all sorted out, I can sit down and then, oh God, all that stress is over. Like that's sort of inimical. It just doesn't fit into the cosmos. Like we're constantly trying to stop everything out here and calm it down because we're so exhausted and stressed by it all. Right. Because we want to have rigidity, but everything is mobile,
right,
all of the time. And so we can't have a rigid structure. It's going to get pulled apart. We need to have this flexible stability, and that's coming from core strength. And it's not coming from tensile strength. It's not coming from holding on, right? And it's not coming from pushing, pulling, grabbing, resisting. It's it's yoga strength, right?
It's willpower. It's muscle memory. I think one of the key pieces of daily practice that I have to keep relearning over and over again is that you have to keep doing it because it fixes part of your brain. Like you don't know it fixes a part of your brain until you get that part of your brain fixed, and you're like, oh yeah, this is the part of my life that works right when I do daily practice. You know, and it's hard to, how do you put that into words? You know, what it is you're behaving.
It's a tricky thing to explain to youngsters, that you can't judge youngsters, but you can't judge a daily practice in the first month. You can't judge a daily 3 months. You can't judge a daily practice in a year. Do you know what I mean? Like all you can do is look at the people who are doing it, and if you want to be like them, trust the technology. You know what I mean? And then you can see what happens if we apply these very subtle tools over very, very, very prolonged periods. I'm a big fan of ebbs and flows, right? I'm not a religiously do the practice every day guy. Like, and I'm very much into this yielding and this flexible thing. Do you know what I mean? And if I don't feel like doing it, I'm not going to do it. But then I'm going to see what effect that has on me. At what point am I like, oh, I need to do my practice again? And my daily practice prior to COVID and getting very ill was ridiculously elaborate. It was an aesthetic exercise. was about being hardcore. Do you know what I mean? It was about like proving stuff. And I can't do that kind of practice with the way that my health has been in the last few years.
Right.
And so it becomes much more this kind of step-by-step mediation, not about what is the perfect practice and then trying to stick to it. Literally, what is my body capable of today and what does it need, right? And it turns out that when you have significant kind of health issues, your priorities become absolutely identical to the priorities of a serious mystic. Absolutely identical, because I've got to be healthy, I've got to be calm, right? And I've got to be compassionate with myself and others, or I cannot survive this illness.
Yep, that is the business of humanity. That is the business of humanity, is maintaining that calmness to be able to function, to experience.
And that comes from non-attachment, as far as I'm concerned. If we so much of our life is just tantrums about the world not going how we want it to go.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
Exactly.
Like, oh, is it raining? Do you know what I mean? Sorry.
Right.
Like, and another day you love it. Like,
you know, I was thinking about grief the other day, and it's kind of a letdown when you think about grief. The whole goal of grief is acceptance. You go through all the stages of grief to reach a point where you're not okay with things being bad. Like we were talking about earlier, we know that what's going on right now in your country is terrible, and that's not okay. But it is what it is, right? And it is God being God. It is the very God of very God.
Yeah.
You know, and it's not always great. You know?
But it's necessary. It's how are we going to learn our lessons?
Right.
You don't know what boundaries you need until you've had bad boundaries, right?
Right, and accepting that thing about reality, that Gaia creates monsters, and all of the stories of Zeus are about fighting these monsters that Gaia created. You know, all of it. The Titans, Gaia's creation. You know, all of Gaia's creations were terrible, and they gave us trouble. That's just life. You know, that's fate, right? Is we get to fight Gaia's monsters, but accepting that and it's like that's the point of our grief process. That's the point of this idea about enlightenment, I think, that we have in the West. I don't think it's an accurate portrayal of Eastern enlightenment, but the idea that we have of enlightenment that I had as a Gen Xer reading Donald Michael Craig and Crowley and all this other interpretations of interpretations. My understanding was that we would reach a point where we weren't suffering anymore. You know, that was the point of nirvana, was that you stopped suffering. And it's not that. It seems like, to me, instead, it's accepting suffering, that it's an ebb and a tide, you know, that you create a liturgical year with your practice because you know that the monkey self is bored after 3 weeks of doing the same daily ritual, and you don't do Liber Resh 4 times a day for 365 days unless you're a special kind of guy, you know, if you're really into trains, and it's okay, whatever, you know, it's not for everybody. It's you gotta have variety. You're distracted, you get sick, you know, your practice has to be adaptive. I don't know. Anyway, the point I think is that whatever your system is, you know, the most important thing is shining that light. You know, all these systems of initiation, they polish the lens so that more light gets through, you know, and the experiences we go through help us be more effective at shining our light. You know, I think that what you're doing with your chapbook, the black chapbook, is hardly black at all. I think it's shining more light on those important things. You know,
if it was black, you wouldn't see the light, dude.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. So let's go back to comments real quick. Let's see. So. We've got fate is the result of not making choices. Yes, very much interested in that. Dude's like, what if Gaia's monsters were like kaiju, man, and like Zeus was like a mecha, Deus ex mecha Zeus. All right, I think that was like a show I watched in the 90s. And yes, other people are also into trains. Yes, trains are awesome. I mean, trains are important. I like trains. So yeah.
Yeah,
So it's the
yeah. Who doesn't like good?
backbone of American industry. I can explain that to you in way too much detail if you want to know.
My
Took a
my
while.
my my great grandparents effectively, or great great grandparents, came to London having built the train lines down here. Do you know what I mean? It's like so much of the sort of the story of why we're so confused about who we are as a species is to do with the incredible connectivity that happened as a result of things like trains. You know what I mean? The ability
Oh yeah.
to move around and to separate from the direct relationship with kind of place and with family that has been so core to human identity. And then this is where we get our identity crises from, that mean that we're trying to nail down more and more who are we, and we've got to let go.
That's
and
great.
because who are we is an ongoing question
Right.
that
And
can only be.
and that zero that we were talking about is the earth. And that breakdown of the core family values and the Christian mindset and the white versus black and the oppressive of Europe over every American, or and America over every country in the world, all of that is part of our is what it is, life, but at the same time we're all in that circle, we're all in that big zero, and we're all going through that transformation. We're watching it happen, and it's painful and it sucks to watch. It's the Kali Yuga, right? But that dissolution of self and the reformation of values around ecological principles, right? Around we got divorced from our planet, and now we're going to be able to reconnect to it. Our spirituality that got separated from our ecstatic rituals. We're the communication thing, the hermetic link of everything is making it possible for us to be able to transcend, I think, and we're destroying the planet in the process. But I have hope that we're also going to fix it. It's just part
Whatever
of it.
happens, that we do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Whatever happens, that we do. Whatever happens, we'll shuffle the cards again.
And
Over and
magicians
over.
are going to have more power to do what we want if we keep doing the practices and we keep shining the light. So, all right, man. Okay, I think I'm gonna go ahead and wrap things up there. If you want to hang on, I'm gonna turn off the streaming. Thank you everybody for hanging out with us for a little bit. I'm sure that Rob will be back again if I can talk him into it. He's always a blast to talk to. All right, but thanks everybody for joining us. We'll talk to you later.